Thursday, October 2nd, 2025, 9:30 p.m., El Segundo, California. Keith Moore was at home with his family in Manhattan Beach, watching TV. It was a typical Thursday evening in Southern California. The kids were settling down. The night was calm. And then, without warning, everything changed. First came the sound. Not quite an explosion, not quite a roar. Moore would later describe it as plane engines, like a massive aircraft about to crash. The noise grew louder and louder. Then came the whoosh. The house shook. The windows rattled. The curtains flew up, even though the windows were barely open. For a moment, Moore thought it was an earthquake. Then he looked outside. The entire sky had turned orange. What happened next would become one of the most spectacular industrial fires in recent California history. A massive fireball erupting from the largest oil refinery on the West Coast, visible from over 20 miles away, threatening one of the most densely populated areas in America. This is the complete story of the night the sky caught fire. Inside the refinery at that exact moment, a worker was going about his normal duties. He had no idea he was about to witness something that would haunt him forever. He heard it before he saw it, a sound he would struggle to describe. "Next thing I know, I hear like a big whoosh," he would later tell reporters, his voice still shaking. It was like wind, but like pressurized wind. Then came the light. "Next thing I know, bro, I see everything in front of me just light up, and I see shadows of towers and pieces of equipment, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's a fire." He didn't wait to see what happened next. He ran. The Chevron El Segundo refinery isn't just any industrial facility. It's a behemoth, spanning nearly 2 square miles with over 1,100 miles of pipelines snaking through the complex. This refinery has been operating since 1911. It's older than most of the people who work there. It's older than their grandparents. For over a century, it's been turning crude oil into the gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel that keeps Southern California moving. The numbers are staggering. This single facility produces 290,000 barrels of crude oil every day. That's enough gasoline to fill up 1 million cars daily. It supplies more than 40% of all jet fuel used in Southern California and 20% of the region's motor vehicle fuel. Los Angeles International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, is just miles away. If this refinery goes offline, Southern California doesn't just slow down. It grinds to a halt. And on October 2nd, 2025, at 9:30 p.m., something went catastrophically wrong. Miguel Morales was outside when it happened. He saw the sky change color. So I saw the sky turn orange, and I was just wondering, like, what the hell happened? What is that? Then he witnessed something he'll never forget. And then I saw the whole explosion happen. It was just like a whole mushroom cloud of fire. It just started popping up. A mushroom cloud. Those words carry weight. They evoke images of the worst disasters humanity has witnessed. And for the people of El Segundo and the surrounding communities, that's exactly what they were seeing in real time. Howard Thorne, another El Segundo resident, had a front row seat to the catastrophe. He would later tell reporters it was horrifying. But the word doesn't quite capture it. How do you describe watching your neighborhood sky transform into what looks like the end of the world? Keith Moore didn't wait to find out if his family was safe. The whole sky was lit up, he recalled. It was like a really, really bright day, brighter than the moon on a really bright day. The flames were about 400 yards from his house, close enough to feel the heat, close enough to see individual flames dancing hundreds of feet into the air. He grabbed his wife, his kids, and his dogs. They packed up and drove south, just to get out of harm's way. One resident near the refinery had an even closer call. She was at home when she felt it. "It felt like an earthquake," she told FOX 11. Then came the visual. "And then I saw a red flash through our blinds onto the side of the house facing the refinery. She looked out her window and her blood ran cold. The refinery was on fire, and not just any fire. And then I heard the hiss. That is usually the safety flare, but it was way more intense than usual. She knew something was very wrong. Safety flares are normal at refineries. This wasn't normal. So I went and got her up. We booked it out the door, and there was just nothing but a ball of fire that looked like it could cross the street and come this way towards all the houses on this side. Imagine that for a moment. Looking out your window and seeing a wall of fire so massive you think it might consume your home, your street, your entire neighborhood. At a nearby Topgolf facility, Celissa Sanchez and others were enjoying their evening when they heard the bang, then felt the rumbling. It was so close. The explosion when it first happened was gigantic. It was so huge. No one really understood what was going on, and everyone's initial thought was just to leave. But leaving wasn't easy. Everyone had the same idea. The parking lot became chaos. Cars everywhere, people panicking, trying to get as far away as possible from whatever was happening at that refinery. One neighbor would later tell NBC4, "I never ever fear anything. This fire, I got in panic mode when I saw it. It looked like about 7 to 10 football fields wide of a flame and smoke billowing in the air. 7 to 10 football fields of fire. Let that sink in. Not a small blaze, not a controlled burn. An inferno spanning hundreds of yards, sending flames hundreds of feet into the sky, creating a glow so intense it could be seen from Malibu, over 20 miles away. At 9:35 p.m., the first 911 calls started flooding in. The El Segundo Fire Department, located just a quarter mile from the refinery, responded immediately. But what could they do against this? Fire Division Chief Casey Snow arrived on scene and made an assessment. The fire was burning in the southeast corner of the refinery. It had originated in what's called a process unit or isolation unit, where crude oil is separated and refined, and the fuel feeding this monster, gasoline and diesel, thousands of gallons of highly flammable petroleum products burning out of control. But here's the thing about refineries. They're designed for this, not designed to prevent fires completely. That's impossible when you're processing explosive materials 24/7. They're designed to contain them, and that's exactly what happened. The Chevron El Segundo refinery has its own fire department, 24 full-time firefighters who train for exactly this scenario. They know every pipe, every valve, every pressure point in that massive complex. When the fire erupted, they didn't panic. They executed their emergency protocols. Using remote-controlled water lines, they began dousing the flames from a distance. They worked to depressurize the affected systems, isolating the fire to prevent it from spreading to other parts of the facility. If the fire had reached certain storage tanks or other process units, the explosion could have been exponentially worse. We're talking catastrophic, city-leveling catastrophic. Chief Snow explained the strategy to reporters. It's contained to the Chevron refinery, so there's no hazard to the adjacent cities or residents in El Segundo or Manhattan Beach. Units on scene are working to depressurize and isolate the incident and suppress the fire. But there was a problem. They couldn't just spray water and put it out. It's just a waiting game right now because there's residual gasoline and diesel that's going to burn, and there's not much we can do about it. We're just keeping everything around it cool and trying to depressurize it, and eventually that gasoline will burn out and we'll be in good shape. Translation: they had to let it burn, letting thousands of gallons of fuel burn while making sure nothing else caught fire, while making sure the flames didn't spread, while making sure nearby communities were safe, all while a fireball the size of multiple football fields raged just yards away. Inside the refinery, chaos of a different kind was unfolding. At any given time, there are approximately 1,000 Chevron employees and another 1,000 contractors working at the facility. That's 2,000 people who need to be accounted for. 2,000 people who could be injured, 2,000 families waiting to hear if their loved ones made it out. The evacuation protocols kicked in immediately. Workers fled the affected area, emergency systems activated, and then came the agonizing wait as supervisors checked and rechecked their lists. Who made it out? Who's still inside? Is anyone missing? By late Thursday night, Chevron spokesperson Allison Cook could finally deliver the news everyone was waiting for. All refinery personnel and contractors have been accounted for, and there are no injuries. No injuries. Not one. In a fire of this magnitude, with an explosion powerful enough to shake houses and be heard for miles, with flames visible from 20 miles away, somehow, miraculously, everyone made it out safe. It was the best news in what could have been an absolute catastrophe, but the fire was far from over. As the night wore on, emergency officials made decisions that would affect thousands of people. The city of Manhattan Beach, located about 2 miles southwest of El Segundo, issued a shelter-in-place order. Residents were told to stay indoors, close their windows and doors, bring pets inside. The order specifically targeted the tree section of Manhattan Beach, the area closest to the refinery. Major roads were shut down: Rosecrans Avenue from Vista Del Mar to Pacific Coast Highway, Pacific Coast Highway from Rosecrans Avenue to El Segundo Boulevard. The famous Pacific Coast Highway, the scenic route that hugs the California coastline, was closed. The same highway that had been forced to close earlier in the year during the devastating Palisades fire. At Pepperdine University in Malibu, over 20 miles away, officials issued alerts. They were monitoring the situation, because even from that distance the flames were visible. The orange glow in the sky was unmistakable. Students and faculty could see it from campus. Meanwhile, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass was being briefed. California Governor Gavin Newsom was being briefed. This wasn't just an industrial accident anymore. This was a regional emergency. The Governor's Office of Emergency Services began coordinating with local and state agencies. The message was clear: protect the community at all costs. Our office is coordinating in real time with local and state agencies to protect the surrounding community and ensure public safety, the governor's office stated. Los Angeles International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, sits just miles from the refinery. Pilots approaching LAX could see the flames. Passengers looking out their windows could see the orange glow. But remarkably, not a single flight was canceled, diverted, or delayed. Operations continued as normal. The show must go on, even when the sky is on fire. As the hours ticked by, air quality became a major concern. Burning petroleum products released particulate matter and toxins into the air. Was the smoke safe to breathe? Were residents in danger? The South Coast Air Quality Management District immediately began monitoring. Nahal Mogharabi, Assistant Deputy of Communications for AQMD, delivered cautiously optimistic news. We're currently not seeing any elevated particulate matter or air toxins. That may change as the smoke settles this evening. She recommended that residents close their doors and windows if they saw or smelled smoke. Monitoring systems at the refinery's fence line showed no exceedances. The smoke, at least initially, was staying within acceptable limits. But everyone knew that could change. As the night wore on and the wind pattern shifted, anything was possible. Throughout the night, firefighters maintained their vigil. The flames continued to burn. The orange glow continued to light up the South Bay, and people watched. From their homes, from their cars, from anywhere they could see. Some filmed it, some photographed it, some just stared in disbelief. By around 7 a.m. on Friday morning, October 3rd, crews had finally gained control. The fire was mostly contained, but mostly is a dangerous word when you're dealing with a petroleum fire. Crews remained on scene to fully extinguish the flames and monitor hotspots. El Segundo Mayor Chris Pimentel addressed the media. "We have 0 reported injuries, and all workers and contractors are accounted for. We rehearse these things in conjunction with Chevron all the time. We do a full sweep of disaster preparedness drills, everything from spills in the ocean to fires at the refinery." The drills worked. The training paid off. The systems held. But it was a close call. Too close. As Friday morning dawned, residents of El Segundo and surrounding communities woke up to a changed landscape. The shelter-in-place order had been lifted shortly after 1 a.m. The roads had reopened. The air quality remained good, but the questions remained. What caused this? How did a facility that's been operating for over a century suddenly erupt in flames? Why did safety systems that are supposed to prevent exactly this kind of catastrophe fail? The investigation began immediately. Chevron officials, local authorities, state agencies, and federal inspectors descended on the refinery. They would examine every piece of equipment, every valve, every sensor. They would interview every worker who was on site. They would reconstruct the timeline minute by minute. But here's the troubling part. This isn't the first time. In fact, it's not even close. The Chevron El Segundo refinery has experienced at least 4 other fires since 2016. Let that sink in. 4 other fires in less than a decade. In 2016, a fire burned several storage containers at the refinery. In 2017, a fire broke out near the storage tanks and was extinguished in about an hour with no injuries. In 2018, a power failure triggered a burn-off that sent black smoke into the sky for miles. And in 2022, just 3 years ago, firefighters responded to yet another fire at the facility. Each time, officials said there was no threat to the public. Each time, no one was hurt. Each time, the fire was contained. But here's the question no one wants to ask. How many close calls does it take before we stop calling them close calls and start calling them warnings? This refinery supplies 40% of Southern California's jet fuel, 20% of its gasoline. It's built in 1911, which means much of the infrastructure is over a century old. Yes, it's been updated and maintained. Yes, modern safety systems have been installed. But at its core, this is an aging facility processing explosive materials in one of the most populated regions in America. If this fire had spread beyond the isolation unit, if it had reached the storage tanks, if the winds had been stronger, if the response had been slower, we could be talking about a very different story. We could be talking about evacuations of tens of thousands of people. We could be talking about a fuel shortage that cripples the region. We could be talking about casualties. But we're not, because this time, luck was on our side. Training was on our side. The wind was on our side. Everything that could go right did go right. The worker who was inside when the fire started, the one who heard the whoosh and saw everything light up, he made it out. Keith Moore and his family who packed up and fled south, they were safe. The residents who thought the flames might cross the street and consume their homes, they were okay. The 2,000 workers at the facility, all accounted for. The surrounding communities, protected. As of Friday morning, October 3rd, the fire was under control. The cause remains under investigation. Officials promise a thorough review. Chevron has pledged to cooperate fully, and life in Southern California continues. But here's what we know. On Thursday night, October 2nd, 2025, at 9:30 p.m., something went wrong at the Chevron El Segundo refinery. Something that turned the sky orange. Something that sent a mushroom cloud of fire into the air. Something that made people think their homes were about to burn. Something that shook houses and closed highways and lit up the night for 20 miles in every direction. We know that through a combination of training, quick response, and sheer luck, no one was hurt. We know that the systems designed to contain these disasters worked. We know that the community is safe. But we also know this is the 5th fire at this facility in less than a decade. We know this refinery is critical infrastructure for one of America's largest metropolitan areas. We know it's built on century-old foundations, and we know that next time we might not be so lucky. The investigation continues, the questions remain, and somewhere in El Segundo, that refinery continues to operate, processing 290,000 barrels of crude oil every single day, keeping Southern California moving. The night the sky turned orange is over, but the conversation about what happens next is just beginning.